Hey, everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today, we're diving into a hot topic that's been making waves. Is Canada's relationship with the United States over? I mean, with trade disputes, tariffs, and some pretty bold statements floating around, it's easy to wonder if these two North American neighbors are drifting apart or worse, hitting a breaking point. But is it really over, or is this just a rough patch in a long, intertwined history? Stick with me as we unpack the past, present, and future of this relationship in detail. If you're curious about global politics or just want to know what's going on between these two countries, hit that like button, subscribe, and let's get started. Historical context. Alright, to understand where Canada and the US are today, we need to rewind a bit. The US and Canada share one of the closest relationships in the world geographically, economically, and even culturally. They've got the longest undefended border, stretching over 5,500 miles, and a history of cooperation that goes back centuries. But it hasn't always been smooth sailing. Back in the 19th century, tensions flared during events like the War of 1812, when British forces and Canadian militias clashed with the US. Fast forward to the 20th century, and things started to stabilize. After World War II, Canada and the US became allies through NATO, NORAD, and a slew of trade deals. By the 1980s, the Canada-US Free Trade Agreement kicked things into high gear, followed by NAFTA in 1994, which tied Canada, the US, and Mexico into a massive economic bloc. Economically, they're like two peas in a pod. The US is Canada's biggest trading partner, with over $700 billion in goods crossing the border annually in recent years. Canada supplies the US with energy, think oil, natural gas, and electricity, while the US sends Canada everything from cars to tech. They're also military allies, sharing intelligence and coordinating defense through NORAD. Culturally? Well, we've got hockey, Hollywood, and Tim Hortons meeting Starbucks at every turn. But here's the thing, closeness doesn't mean conflict-free. Trade disputes over lumber, dairy, and steel have popped up for decades. And politically? Leaders don't always see eye to eye. So, when we hear talk about the relationship being over, it's worth asking, is this new, or just history repeating itself? Let's dig into what's happening now. Current tensions. So, why are people saying the Canada-US relationship is in trouble? Let's break it down. In early 2025, tensions have spiked, largely around trade and rhetoric. The US has rolled out tariffs, think 25% on Canadian goods like autos and steel, which hit Canada hard. These aren't just random taxes, they're part of a broader US push to prioritize domestic manufacturing and reduce trade deficits. For Canada, where exports to the US make up about 75% of its trade, this is a gut punch. Industries like automotive, which employ hundreds of thousands, are feeling the heat. Now, Canada hasn't sat quietly. They've announced retaliatory tariffs on US goods, everything from bourbon to electronics. This tit-for-tat trade war risks driving up prices for consumers on both sides of the border. Imagine paying more for your car or groceries because of these tariffs. Not fun, right? And it's not just economics. There's been a war of words, too. Some US leaders have made provocative comments about Canada, even joking about it becoming a 51st state. That's not gone over well in Ottawa, where sovereignty is a big deal. On the Canadian side, Prime Minister Mark Carney has called the US less reliable as a partner, signaling a shift. He's pushed for Canada to diversify trade, looking to Europe and Asia instead of leaning so heavily on the US. This is a big deal because, historically, Canada's economy has been tied to the US like a trailer to a truck. If Canada pivots away, it could reshape North American dynamics. But let's zoom out. Are tariffs the whole story? Not quite. There's also friction over migration and security. The US has been cracking down on border crossings, which affects Canadians who travel or work across the line. And don't forget energy. Canada's a major supplier of US oil, but with the US pushing for energy independence, that relationship could shift. Plus, there's public sentiment. Some Canadians are boycotting US travel and goods, while Americans are starting to view Canada less as an ally, according to recent polls. Now, I know what you're thinking, this sounds bad, but is it really over? Well, let's not jump to conclusions. Trade disputes aren't new. Remember the softwood lumber wars? And while the rhetoric is spicy, leaders are still talking. A recent call between US and Canadian officials was described as productive, with plans for more negotiations. So, maybe this is a storm, not a breakup. What do you think, trade war or just tough love? Drop a comment below. The future of the relationship. Alright, let's wrap this up. Is the relationship really over, or can it be saved? Honestly, over feels dramatic. Canada and the US are too interconnected to just walk away. Their economies, security, and people are tied together in ways that tariffs can't unravel overnight. But things are definitely changing. Short term, expect more trade talks. The US-Mexico-Canada Agreement, or USMCA, is up for review soon, and that's a chance to renegotiate terms. Both sides have leveraged Canada with energy, the US with market access, so there's room for compromise. Long-term, Canada's push to diversify trade could reduce its reliance on the US, but that'll take years. The US, meanwhile, needs Canada's resources and cooperation, especially in a world where global alliances are shifting. Public sentiment matters, too. If Canadians and Americans demand cooler heads, leaders might listen. And let's not forget the human side. People on both sides want to keep the border open and friendly. So, my take? It's not over, it's evolving. Tough times test relationships, but they can also make them stronger. What's your prediction? Will Canada and the US patch things up, or are we in for a colder chapter? Let me know in the comments. And that's a wrap, folks. Thanks for sticking with me through this deep dive into Canada and the US. It's a complex story, but one thing's clear, these two countries are neighbors for life, even if they bicker sometimes. If you enjoyed this, give it a like, share it with a friend, and hit subscribe for more videos on global stories that matter. Got thoughts on this topic? Drop them in the comments, I read every one. And if you want to stay updated, click that notification bell so you don't miss our next video. Until then, keep curious, and I'll see you in the next one.